Layla Marie Santanello was a 20-year-old from Kingsport, Tennessee. She was the mother of one and had several siblings. On the morning of June 27th, 2023, Layla bummed a cigarette off a warehouse worker near the Americourt hotel, then walked off toward a nearby bike path. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Dunsel, and this is Unfound. As most of you know, I have no children. I'm not saying I never wanted children. All I'm saying is I have none now and will never have any. So as an outsider and objective observer on parenting, I gotta say, I see no secret formula for creating spectacular adults. Yes, there are obviously better choices versus worse choices, but as I like to say, Presidents Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton came from dysfunctional families. Whereas the Menendez brothers, well, we know what they did despite being given everything. And no, I don't believe they're tales of abuse. For what we do here, this is all relevant because for almost 9 years you've heard from parents, seemingly mostly great people who loved their kids. Yet those now missing kids ended up becoming addicts and criminals and living lives that were the opposites of the lives of the people who raised them. How can this be? Well, with Layla Santanello, we get very much of the same. How can children of good people go bad? It's a mystery. And now a summary of the case. Layla Santanello was the first of many kids that her mother Jennifer would have. The funny part, her mother thought Layla was going to be a boy. Although Layla's mother had her own trials and tribulations, Layla was loved and got lots of attention. She was especially close to her maternal grandmother. Layla even overcame dyslexia. She had a daughter, Nova. However, seemingly, none of this would be strong enough to keep her on the right path. All it took was getting into a relationship with the wrong guy. This started a 2-year descent into addiction that culminated in Layla leaving her 2-year-old with others for long periods of time. And there didn't seem to be any end in sight. So, on the morning of June 27th, 2023, Layla was out in Kingsport on her own. She had left her boyfriend at his mother's place a couple days before that after he insulted her. Layla had been staying with acquaintances at the Americourt Hotel, a place Layla knew very well. Although no one is sure where Layla spent the night of June 26th, on the next morning she emerged from some woods and approached a warehouse worker near the Americourt for a cigarette. He obliged her and lit it as well. Layla then went back in the direction she came toward the local green belt pathway. She was never seen again. Searches conducted just days later yielded nothing. In addition, no witnesses came forward to say they saw Layla walking the green belt that morning or any other time. I can't imagine being a parent who has such high hopes for an offspring, only to see that child turn his or her life into a living hell. Contemplate what your own theories are regarding parenting and producing good law-abiding citizens and neighbors, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, why didn't anyone see Layla after she walked off that morning? Number 2, are you inclined or not inclined to believe that the man in Layla's life had something to do with her disappearance? And number 3, is Layla's disappearance connected to another Kingsport case that happened just 4 months later? Layla's family isn't sure what to think, but they sure have heard a lot of stories. The guest for this episode is Layla's mother, Jennifer. Unfound News. I once again appeared on Listener D's YouTube channel yesterday. And once again, I got my butt kicked. Please look for the link every week in the discussion group on Facebook. Next, Assistant Eric and I continue to try to put together the Missing in the Atlantic series with the help of the Coast Guard. It's a slow process, but we are committed on bringing it to you. Finally, how would all of you feel about this host appearing on Wheel of Fortune? I'll keep you posted. A note before the interview starts. As you can maybe even hear in this recording, I once again torched my voice due to singing too high and too much. So for this interview, I don't appear in it as much as usual because my voice was just not up to the task. Yet, I still believe this is a top-of-the-line discussion. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Layla Santanello, Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and I need to give a shout-out to podcast host Jason Blair, who acquainted myself with Jennifer. So a shout-out to Jason at the Silver Linings Playbook podcast for making this happen. Jennifer,
and a big thank you.
Yes, for sure. Jason and maybe some people remember I was on Jason's podcast like toward the end of last year. We talked all sorts of things about disappearances. Jennifer, let's start here. Just talk about your family. Of course, Layla is your daughter. Do you have any other kids? What can you say about the Santanello household? Everybody together. Describe it for everybody.
Okay, Layla, at the time of her disappearance, was 20 years old. She was a mother to, at the time, a 2-year-old daughter. Nova Grace is now 4. I do have 2 other biological sons, but I have been, I like to call it co-parent to 2 nephews and a niece. Pretty much their entire lives, they've spent at least half of their living with me in my home.
Wow.
So we're kind of a big, giant group, and we all love each other very much.
Wow. So that's a lot of people under one roof. What are the, that's a lot of kids. What's the age range of these young people?
Today it is, let's see, who's the oldest? Well, Layla would technically be the oldest.
Sure.
22. If she's out there somewhere, she's 22.
Okay.
And then, my nephew Steven is the next one. He is going to be 20. He's going to be 20 next week. And then my son Robbie would be next. He's 19. And then who comes after Robbie? Dylan. And Dylan is 16 now.
Wow.
And Elijah and Gabby are both 15.
That's a lot of teenagers, Jennifer. How do you do it?
I don't know. My nephew Steven, he's an adult. He doesn't live here. Dylan spends more time with my mom than he does over here lately.
Okay.
And then, so I do have Gabby pretty much full time and my boys. And then I have, I have Nova Grace. I've had her for ever since Layla's been gone. So she's 4 now. So it's an interesting group. And then Opie's daughter is also here full time now. She's in school and she works. She's gonna be 19 in like 2 days. Yeah, her birthday's coming up. So yeah, there's a lot of them.
Wow, that sounds like some sort of sitcom or something, Jennifer.
Yeah.
All the blended family and everybody living under one roof and all the things, the hijinks that can go on. But I give you all the credit in the world. That takes a lot of character, and I appreciate you doing that. I'm sure everybody appreciates you doing that. for not just your own kids, but for other family members' kids as well.
I mean, they feel like my kids too.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
for instance, my niece Gabby yesterday, it was Mother's Day, obviously,
Yeah.
and I was watching something. It was a short on YouTube that the Q Center for Missing Persons had put together, and someone had sent it to me because I actually had a clip in it, but I was at the very end. So I'm watching all these other moms and their little clips prior to mine, and they made me cry, obviously. So I'm in my bed bawling, and Miss Gabby comes bounding into the bedroom just with this huge smile on her face, a perennial plant in one arm and a giant envelope in the other, and she slaps them down on the bed, and she had a photo made of me, her, and Nova Grace at Christmas, and she had brought me a plant and a card, and she was just so proud of herself, and I don't know, it was just a really beautiful, sweet moment. I just love her so much.
You must be doing something right, Jennifer.
I hope so. God, I hope so.
All right. Well, of course, unfortunately, today we're here to talk about Layla and her disappearance from a few years ago. So I appreciate telling everybody about your family. I love to get to know about families, and I know the listeners do as well, to set up some context of where the missing person came from. So I appreciate that. But let's move on to Layla. Just tell the listeners everything they need to know about your daughter, personality, interests, hobbies, raising her, I guess being the oldest of all those kids. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. She was born in Neptune, New Jersey. I was 20 years old when she was born. And she was born August 5th of 2002.
Wow.
I was a baby myself. I had no idea what the heck I was doing, but I knew I loved her from the moment that she was there.
Yeah.
And I remember I didn't find out if she was going to be a boy or a girl. Like, I wanted it to be a surprise. My sister was much older, and she already had 2 kids at that point, and she had told me, like, that labor's usually easier when you don't know. So I was like, okay, I don't want to find out. And I had convinced myself that I was having a boy. Like, completely convinced myself. Even though every night I would have these dreams that she was born and she was a girl, but I still had convinced myself 100% that she was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets born, she comes out, and the first thing the doctor says is, "It's a girl." And you can, my dad had made her father bring in a little recording device to record her first cries. And you can hear me on the tape, and I'm like, wait, it's a what?
Wow.
And then they laid her on my chest, and I fell in love absolutely instantly. And the thing that I knew I was in for it in that moment, in that second. My sister had dragged me to all these free classes, all of these parenting classes and birthing classes, and all about your new baby classes, and all this stuff, because I was so young and I had no idea what I was doing. And my sister wanted to make sure that I knew what I was getting myself into. And in the classes, they tell you your baby won't be able to lift their head, and they likely won't open their eyes, for several hours after birth, and all this stuff. Let me tell y'all, Layla, she put an elbow in front of her and then another elbow in front of her, and she lifted her shoulders up off of my chest and looked at me. Opened her eyes and had this big grin on her face. I'm not kidding. I've been telling that story for 22 years. She stared the bejesus out. It's so strong. She's wow. Oh, man. I was so proud.
Did she get her name from the Eric Clapton song or Derek and the Dominoes song or what?
It was Eric Clapton. It was Eric Clapton, his version. And then the night that she was born, actually, my father was a radio DJ. And he had a show that night, a live show that night, and he played it over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah, he was so proud of her. He was so happy when she got here. he just loved and adored her so much.
Wow.
So she was born in Neptune, New Jersey. That is her little birth story. And we lived in New Jersey for another 2 years before I moved to Florida. Her dad and I didn't make it much longer after she was born. We had a very unhealthy relationship. It was toxic and controlling and wild. And, when it was just me, I could handle it. But once I brought her into the picture, I was like, this is too much. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want this to be what she sees growing up. I don't want this to be what she sees as like a loving relationship or what that's supposed to look like. And I knew that within 3 months. And so George and I split up, and I was single for a long time, actually. And I waited tables at night, and my mom and dad kept her in the evenings, and I was with her all morning and all day. And we worked that out for about 2 years. And I was kind of wild when I was younger, too. And I had gotten myself a DUI. And I got myself, into a little bit of trouble. Not like a huge amount of trouble. But I just had this, instinct that if I stayed where I was at, I was going to keep going down this, crazy, wild party girl path. And I didn't want that for Layla or myself. And so when she was 2.5, we moved to Florida. I had been having a long-term relationship with a man named Robert Wells, who ended up being the man that raised Layla. He and I had a baby in Florida. That would be Robbie.
Okay.
And then one by one, his family members started moving out of state. So now I'm in Florida, and my family's in New Jersey, and his family is leaving. They're coming this way to Northeast Tennessee and what would it be, Southwest Virginia, because they were kind of scattered in this little corner or whatever. And all of a sudden, it was like we were going to be there alone. We were living in a little town called Crawfordville outside of Tallahassee, in a little trailer. And he had just finished college and had a certification for firefighter, and he was in school to become not a medic, but an EMT. Yeah, I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to raise kids alone without family. So I said to him, we're either going to go back to New Jersey, where my family is, or we're going to go to Tennessee, where your family is. And we followed his family up here. And we've been here for 18 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how we ended up here. They called me a halfback. I waited tables for 20 years, and a lot of people around, people in town know me because I waited tables. I either waited on them or I worked with them at some point. And they would call me a halfback. You moved to Florida and moved halfway.
Ha! I've never heard that. 9 years of doing this podcast, I've never heard that term. Okay. All right. So how did Layla like growing up in Tennessee?
Layla was very fortunate because she got the best of both worlds. So she was in Tennessee for the school year, and then she would go and spend 6 to 8 weeks in New Jersey with my mom, and she would spend weekends with George's family or George, depending on the situation and what all was going on in George's life. It was very important to me that she continued to know who her people were, even though I had taken her out of state. I wanted her to know her family. He has a really amazing family. They're very supportive people. They're a very supporting, loving bunch that spend time together still constantly. Grandma Laurel is the matriarch of the family, and at any given moment, half of her children are in her house, and they're all grown up. So I always thought that was really beautiful and amazing, and I wanted Layla to know that and see a family like that, because I didn't have that kind of relationship with my grandparents or even aunts and uncles. So in the summertime, she got to spend several weeks with my mom, visiting her dad's side of the family. She went to Girl Scout camp, and then she was here for, the schooling, and then mom and dad would come down and visit us for holidays and things like that. She liked it for the most part. It's beautiful here.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a beautiful area. I fell in love with the mountains. The day I got here, it was over, man. My only issue with this area, the thing that bothers me about it still to this day, is there's not a lot of culture.
Yeah.
You know, I'm out in the country, the Bible Belt. It's very white bread, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I grew up in a melting pot state, and everybody's everybody, and you celebrated other people's cultures, and it was a very different experience for me growing up than and I always felt like I had done my kids a disservice in that way, that they didn't get to grow up the way that I did. But anyway, when Layla was in first grade, she started having trouble as far as educationally. She was lashing out at school. I remember I had gotten a phone call from her teacher, and this had to have been like the third or fourth phone call about behavioral issues that we had never seen in her before. And I don't remember what exactly she did, but she had done something and gotten into a fight with another student or some crazy, I don't even know, but they wanted to psychologically evaluate her and all of this stuff. And I remember sinking to the floor in my kitchen, thinking, what is going on with my kid? And I'm not seeing these behaviors at home. I don't know, I just felt this sense of doom, something bad was, coming. She was later diagnosed with ADHD and eventually diagnosed as dyslexic. And that is where that lashing out was coming from. She felt like she couldn't accomplish things. And she had this issue where, if she didn't think she could do it, she would just give up and then act out. And so I took 2 years off. I stopped working and just dove into tutoring her. She had to do first grade over again, and so she would go to school during the day. Around the same time, my son Robbie was diagnosed with developmental delays, and he would later be diagnosed with autism. And so during the day, while Layla was at school, I was driving Robbie to and from multiple different therapies. And in the evenings, I was tutoring Layla. Sight words, all kinds of stuff. I had a best friend who was a special needs teacher. And she, literally is the reason that Layla learned to read. She gave me a lot of great advice and really helped out a lot. So by the time she finally did reach second grade, we were on a much better path. And
wow.
Okay.
Go ahead. And what kind of, as she became they start to develop their own personalities. What kind of personality would you say Layla developed into?
Layla she's a sassy, funny,
sassy.
Tough. She is. She's sassy, funny, and tough. She's my opposite. I always wished I could be more like her. She doesn't have a filter. She doesn't think before she speaks. She just lets it out, and she's unapologetic about it. She does not care. It just comes. There's no filter from her brain to her mouth ever. And I find it refreshing most of the time. She's a Leo, so she loved attention. Her love language was gifts, getting and giving, receiving and giving. So, any little thing, you could bring her a flower and it was the greatest day ever. She's incredibly artistically talented in so many different ways. But my favorite thing that she can do is the way that she, why can't I think of the word? It's, she has this composition. She's incredibly talented at composition as far as she'd make a great interior designer.
I see.
She knows what to put where and to make it look absolutely completely amazing and appealing. And Like, that always kind of blew my mind, the way that she was so good at that. Like, she would make these collages on her walls with photos and sketches and drawings, and the way that she would work it all out was like, it always blew my mind. But that's not the only thing she could do. She could draw, she could paint, she could mold clay. Her voice, she has this absolutely incredible, soulful, beautiful singing voice. She was shy about it. She didn't love to use that talent, and that always kind of broke my heart a little bit. And the only singing that I have of her even recorded is I had to sneak up and get it. Like, couldn't know that I was recording it because she would get so self-conscious.
Wow.
So I don't have a whole lot. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't know why she didn't like to sing for us. She's so good at it. But as soon as you turn on something that would record it, she would shy away or stop.
Do you think...
I have a couple videos somewhere in my phone, but I can't find them because it's just me pointing the camera at the wall outside the bathroom while she's singing. And I know they exist. I just haven't found them yet.
Okay. Well, sometimes, as a guy, coincidentally, who is taking singing lessons myself, it's not so much the singing, it's, being recorded and then listening to it. Some people don't like to hear themselves talk or sing.
Yeah.
There are many actors who won't even watch their own movies. Maybe there was a little bit of that going on.
It's very possible. I don't love my voice, and I won't listen to my news interviews, and I won't stuff like that. I can't. I don't know. I get that. I don't love the sound of my voice, and I understand that insecurity very, very much. I guess what I need to say is that I wish I had more of it recorded because I miss it.
Sure.
So then when Layla was 8 going on 9 and Elijah was born, my youngest, my parents moved here. And that changed a lot of things. The dynamic changed a lot. My mom and Layla are super duper close. And so she started spending a lot of time over with my mom. And shortly thereafter, the boy's dad and the man who raised Layla, I don't like to call him stepdad because to her, he's dad.
Okay.
And I don't know how to refer to him in a way that honors the way she felt about her. But then I also don't want to disrespect her actual father. It's a tricky situation. So anyway, he and I were not doing well in our relationship. I think we were doing a great job of hiding that from the children because still to this day they don't understand why we broke up. But it just got to a point where we realized that we were not meant to be romantically intertwined. We are much better off as friends, as we still are more than a decade later. And the split really affected Layla deeply. And I'm going to say that initially, he did take her with him for his visits with the boys. He wanted to be 50-50 parenting, and he wanted to include her, and then he got in a serious relationship, and the other woman was uncomfortable with Layla's presence initially, and so he stopped picking her up when he picked up the boys. And I think that affected her. I know that affected her negatively. I know that it did. And I know that he was trying to do the best he could to move on from the situation. And I know to this day that it breaks his heart that it even happened or that he made that choice. It was about 18 months to 2 years before the other woman kind of warmed up to the idea of Layla still being involved, and she did start going over there again, and her and BJ did, rekindle and mend their fences and all that fun stuff, and he was a huge part of the rest of her life, but there was this blip in the middle where I know she felt abandoned. And I know that bothered her. It was very lucky that my mom and dad were here because they kind of filled that for her. My mom is a school bus driver, and I was always a waitress. So I worked year round, and in the summer times, my mom was off. So she would take Layla on vacations, and she would get her in like different kinds of camps. She's done science camp, drama camp, art camp, like so many different things. She did swimming. She was on a swim team for a while. She's very physically able and like athletic. She was amazing at volleyball. Like, absolutely amazing when she played volleyball.
So it sounds like she was involved in a lot of activities as a kid.
Yes, thanks to my mother, because I was a single mom working full time, and it would have been really hard for me to keep her involved in those things on my own.
Right.
So thanks to my mom, she was able to do lots of different things, and I think my mom enjoyed it just as much as she did.
Right, and I think it's important, being that you brought up earlier, she was dyslexic, to her to be in all those activities, good outlets for her. Being that being that she had some issues in school, there were other ways that she could excel.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. I think that stuff really did boost her confidence, and it was good for her. So around that same time, her dad, her biological father, also sort of went through some of his own struggles, and he sort of stepped away from us for it was something like 7 or 8 years. I don't like to get into detail because I don't.
Okay.
It's not my story to tell, but he was more or less absent for close to 8 years. And so he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth as far as Layla was concerned. And then there was those like 18 months to 2 years where BJ kind of fell off the face of the earth. And I know that these things affected her deeply. And then after the split, I walked myself right into an opioid addiction. I'm not even going to be
Wow.
Yeah, so I was really struggling after the split. I agreed to split time with, BJ, and he's a great dad. He's a great dad, and they needed their time with him. But I was struggling very much with the time. So I would work doubles through the weekends. I gave him every single weekend, and I would work doubles through the weekends to make my money. And at night, I didn't want to go home to an empty house, and so I would go out drinking with the younger crew from work. And slowly but surely, that turned into taking Percocets and things like that to cure my hangover the next day, and eventually that built up to a mess. I was more or less a functioning addict probably for the first 2.5 years, and then things went really downhill for about 18 months. I ended up getting evicted from our house in Bloomingdale, and at that point I came out to my parents. And coming out to your parents as an addict is like the worst feeling in the world. Like, you just feel like the world's biggest failure, and you feel like and you've been lying to them for God knows how long. You know what I mean? It was rough, and Layla was the oldest, and I felt like it was important to be honest with her because I know she knew something was up, and I didn't want to lie. The boys were much younger, and they didn't really find out about all of that for a few more years after I was already in recovery. But Layla kind of had to go through a lot with me because I legitimately just didn't want to lie to her. Like, I felt like she deserved to know the truth, and if you're going to be in recovery, the truth is important. And so it was right around the time that I was starting to get better and sort of like build myself back up that she started to become of age, and those hormones kicked in, and she started acting out. things got really rough there throughout high school. By the end of freshman year, she was in court. She wanted to go to Court Cox Academy. Now, I don't blame her because the high school here really isn't built for special needs kids. It's huge. It's a mess. It's a massive, crazy. Like, I don't know how any kids deal with it. It's a giant mess. And so by the end of her freshman year, she had gotten herself in enough trouble to end up at Court Cox Academy, which is basically quote-unquote bad kid school.
Okay.
But it worked out for her because she got her education in a small group setting. They were able to give her more direction and more help, and she ended up graduating early. So, you know, it wasn't the end of the world, but I remember being really frustrated that, like, felt like she was getting into trouble on purpose to get her school changed. I remember having that feeling. Anyway, when she was 16, no, when she was 15, she ended up on a short period of probation. I believe it was either for having tobacco on school campus or for having, I don't know, marijuana on school campus.
Okay.
I guess you can bleep out whatever I can't say. I don't know what all places this is going. And then she did great, actually, during those 3 months of probation. She had a probation officer that she really looked up to, and she did amazing. And so after that was over, I was like, all right, like we're getting back to normal. Things are going to be great. And we had her in therapy, and she also had a therapist at school. There was a program through Frontier Health where we met weekly as a family, like literally everyone, my mom, my dad, BJ's mom, like her aunts and uncles on that side, like, and we would meet almost weekly to have like a group conversation about like what's best and what's next and how can we support Layla and all of this stuff, like, and the whole family was coming together to try and support her in the best ways that we could. And it was almost like she took offense to it, and she like fought harder against us. And it was a really rough and hard time. Then she started taking off on us. She didn't want to follow the rules, and she didn't want to be home by curfew. And in the state of Tennessee, if your child is out after curfew and you know about it, you have to report them. If you do not report them, they can charge you with like neglect and all these other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, she would take off, and I would call DJ. At this time, I was dating a guy named Mike, and I was working, and he was staying at home with the kids, and so she would take off, and I would call BJ, and he would come and pick me up, and Mike would stay with the boys, and we would drive until we found her. And this happened multiple times throughout that fall. At this point,
where would you find her?
Friends' houses. Her boyfriend's house. She just wanted to be out, I guess. I don't know. Like, she wasn't doing anything terrible, you know. She smoked pot. That was it, though. She never really even drank. She was very against substances aside from the devil's lettuce. That she felt like was like, oh, it grows in the ground. Like, God gave it to us. Everything else she was very, very against, and she was very, she voiced her opinion on these things. She was very judgmental about people who were actively using. And I get it. Like, drugs ruined her life. Yeah. She saw it happen, you know, between me and her biological father. Like, she saw how that, you know, I get it. I understand why she was so judgmental about it. Anyway, I remember I was really struggling. Layla I was in school at the time. I was in cosmetology school, and it's like a day job. Like, you're there Monday through Friday for a full 8 hours you know what I mean, without getting paid. So, I remember being like so frustrated, like I don't know what to do. And I would get different advice. And some people would say to me, if she wants to act like an adult, let her go. Let her go be an adult.
Yeah.
And then other people would say, no, like you have to stop this. You have to do something. And I came to the conclusion that I was going to have to make a choice. And I had two options. Let her go and let her be and let her make all the mistakes. Or I could go downtown and file her unruly and get her back on probation, because when she was on probation, she really did so well. And I thought that this was going to be the best solution. And I was very, very wrong. She ended up with a different probation officer this time, a woman. And I like the woman. I don't have anything against her. I just think that Layla had an issue with her. And she just didn't click with her the way she did with the other probation officer, who was more of a father figure, and more of a strict father figure. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And she started breaking probation. I mean, she would just break curfew or sneak out, or she would be doing all of these things that she was already doing prior to my filing her unruly. And the probation didn't seem to be stopping it. And then she would act angry with me because I wasn't cool like the other moms, like her friends' moms. The moms that smoke pot with their kids, and the moms that cover for them with their probation officers, and the moms that don't follow the rules. And, how could I not be that cool? She took a huge issue with the fact that, I don't know. She was always mad at me for not letting her just go. Layla wanted to be an adult from the time she was 5 years old and knew what that meant. I'm serious. She wanted to run the show for herself from the time she was 5. And now she's 16. She sees the light at the end of the tunnel. And she's, bucking. And then some more broken probation rules happened, and we ended up back in court. Prior to that, we had talked options, where to go from here. We had DCS supports in the house. We had the probation officer. We had the Frontier Health stuff. We had a lot of supports going on, but we were trying to come up with solutions because we had tried all of these other things and nothing was working. Well, I was told that if I turned her over to the state, they could get her a grant into this nature program. And I knew a couple kids that had actually gone through this program and sung its praises and said that it changed their lives and da-da-da-da-da. And I talked to their parents about it and talked to the kids and da-da-da-da-da. And when we went to court, basically, the judge was going to take her anyway, but he kind of asked my opinion on how I felt about things. And I said, she needs help. She needs professional help, and I have done all the things I can do at this point. And, I feel like she'll have more of a chance with you all because of the things I had been told. That's a trick. Don't ever listen to those people, because that's not how it happened for Layla. It didn't work out that way. What they do is they take your kid and they put her in one facility for 30 days to evaluate her. And at the end of that 30 days, based on her evaluation, they're supposed to choose a facility and a program for her. But in reality, what happens is she ends up wherever there was a bed. And that's just the truth of the matter. She ended up at Florence Crittenton Center, which is basically a detention center, and it did more harm than good. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, prior to being called off to the first organization, he did take off on us. She was missing for a week, 7 or 8 days. And man, her friends hit her good. It was January, it was cold. And I remember I didn't go to school all week. every day I was down at all the homeless shelters and the soup kitchens, posting flyers, talking to people, looking for her, because I knew she had made friends with some of the homeless people downtown, and that she liked to go to the soup kitchens because the one had the most amazing cupcakes, she always said. And, couldn't find her. Eventually, her cousin Steven got a hold of her. He was worried about her because it was so cold, and he didn't want her out there in the cold. That was his big thing. Like, he was pacing for days, like, it's too cold. She shouldn't be out there. And then Steven told his mom, I know where Layla is. Can we please go pick her up? And will you please not tell Aunt Jen, but I don't want her to be cold. And so my niece went and picked her up. And for that night, actually, my niece did call me that night. It was late. And she was like, look, I've got her. She's safe. I'm going to take her to breakfast in the morning, and I'm going to need you to show up. And I was like, okay.
All right.
And they basically snitched her out, and she will never forgive them for that. I know that much. So I get a hold of her. I remember getting her home and having her climb out the window again and take off, and the cops had to track her down from my house. Like, it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific.
What was your mother saying? You know, you said that she and your mother were very close. What was your mother saying about all this going on at the time?
I'll be honest, and she's not going to like it. My mom felt like I was forcing too many rules on her. My mom felt like I was being too strict. My mom felt like she could do it better. And in my opinion, based on my knowledge of my mother's raising of teenagers, that meant not paying attention and not enforcing curfews and looking the other way, because that's kind of what happened when I was a teenager. I didn't want that for Layla. I needed her to know that she was cared about and she was loved, and I wanted her safe and protected. My mom and I were actually fighting during this period of time, like, a lot, because Mom disagreed with me. Mom was one of the ones that felt like, oh, if she wants to be an adult, go ahead and let her go. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, even legally, I didn't have that option. Like, in reality, like, I could have looked the other way as much as possible, but I don't know how that would have helped anything. I feel like things would have gone badly faster had I done that. Mm-hmm. But I also regret the way that I ended up doing things, because that didn't help either. Like, those 3 months at Florence Crittenton were awful for her. And at the end of it, we did family therapy every week. And then during her phone calls, she would ask me, can I stay with Nan? Whenever I get released from here, when I finish my program, I want to stay with Nan. And I was against it, and I was against it, and I was against it. And then I ended up with DCS at my door, because Layla was spinning tales. She was taking these little nuggets of truth, and she would expand them and turn them into these, like, big crazy stories. And I was all of a sudden under investigation based on what she was telling people in her group sessions. And, again, it would start out with a little nugget of truth. She was painting me in a very bad light. And I realized that if she didn't get what she wanted, she was going to put the boys in danger. Listen, my daughter is the kind of person who gets what she wants. She knows what she wants, and she gets what she wants, and I love that about her, but it also always drove me crazy, because what she wanted wasn't always good. And that was part of the struggle, So I realized that, my kids now are in danger. Now I'm in recovery, and I have a past, and, I'm in school, and I'm trying to make myself better. Here I am, I have like 3 different investigations based on these stories that have been told. And the stories that have been told, like, this is after I had gone to rehab, and while I was in recovery, and they weren't totally true. Like, one of them was like, oh, I had a New Year's party. Well, it wasn't really a party. It was my boyfriend at the time had friends from out of town over. It was like 3 people, okay? And we let the kids stay up and watch the ball drop and bang pots and pans and set off fireworks or whatever. And they were all drinking. I went to bed right after the ball dropped. I put all the kids to bed right after the ball dropped. And Layla told her group that I had this huge New Year's rager where everyone was smoking METH.
Oh my.
Yeah, she like made it this much bigger thing than it actually was. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, she was telling lies and making you. Yeah, she was putting the rest of your kids in jeopardy because she was lying.
Right. And so now I had to do it again. Now I have to make this big decision. Do I let her? Now at this point she's almost 17, right? This is summertime now, and I have to decide whether she's going to come home with me or she's going to go to my mom's house. And she wants my mom's house more than anything. And apparently she's going to make crap up and make my life a living hell and possibly, cause harm to the boys if she doesn't get what she wants at this point. So I allowed it. We went to court, and she was released to my mother. So that was like from 17 to 18, she was technically in my mom's custody. A few months later, I actually left that boyfriend and moved into the apartment attached to my mom's house with my boys. Layla was living inside the house. The boys and I were living in the apartment. Initially, I was on a futon in the living room, and the boys were sharing the bedroom because it was a 1-bedroom apartment. And then my niece, my oldest niece, my niece and nephews are actually my great niece and nephews, the ones that are like in my life every day. And it's my oldest sister's daughter who had them. Well, she ended up losing custody of them, and mom had to take them on. And so now we had to figure out where we were going to put everybody. It was a week after I moved into that apartment, and I had to figure out where we were going to put everybody. So we ended up putting the 4 boys in the living room of the apartment and me in the little bedroom. And Layla and Gabby shared the back room. That's what we called the girls' room. And so from 17 to 18, we were all together in my mom's house. We went through COVID that way.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you when, of course we're going to get into this, but within all of that, when do you think her addiction started?
It hadn't yet.
It hadn't yet? Wow.
No.
So she was doing all this, she was, this was all before. Wow.
Yeah, she smoked, like I said, she smoked pot. She barely drank, like legitimately hardly drank. Like, I don't think I've ever actually seen her drink personally. And she is still, at this time, she's anti-drugs, anti-addicts, all that stuff. She still, like, this rhetoric would come out of her mouth, and she would just slam anybody who was actively using, and she was completely against it. So she's dating this boy, Smokey, and at some point during COVID, my oldest son actually wanted to go stay with his grandparents because he wanted to be able to help them. He was very worried about them, and things were overwhelming at my house. And Opie, my new boyfriend, the guy I'm with now, he was working and leaving the house and coming back. And my oldest son has autism, and he has a lot of anxiety. And so, Opie's still leaving and coming back made him worry about the virus, and just, there was a lot going on. So Robbie said to me, can I go stay with Grandma Connie? Grandma and Grandpa are shut in at this point. They can't go out, and I want to help them, and it's quieter over there. And I said, yeah, that's fine. So throughout COVID, my son Robbie stayed with his grandmother on his dad's side. And Eli, by this point, had started sleeping in my bed. And Dylan moved inside the house. At some point during that summer, Layla moved the boyfriend in. I don't remember exactly how she convinced my mother, but for a couple of months, they lived in the living room while me and Eli were in the bedroom. Robbie was at Grandma Connie's, and Dylan moved inside the house, like the big house. I don't remember exactly the details that led to this, but somehow or another, she convinced my mom to let Smokey, Nova Grace's father, move in. It was very short-lived. It was really maybe 2 months, 2.5 months. I don't know. Layla turns 18 on August 5th, and the next day she comes to me with a pregnancy test.
Huh.
Positive. Yes. Positive pregnancy test. And, you know, I didn't know what to think at first. I was scared for her. I was worried for her. I knew what it was like to have a baby while you're still a baby. You know, but I knew that she needed my support, and I knew that she needed me to embrace it, you know, and we did have the conversation back then. There were a lot of choices that she could make, and I will support every one of them. Whatever you choose to do, I will be there. And we did have that conversation, and she wanted this baby. And so here I am, terrified for her, but willing to support it because she's my daughter, and she needs the support, and I don't know. I've had a hard time. My mom and I we don't have the best relationship. Like, my dad and I were super close, and, like, we understood each other. My mom and I don't think we ever will. And when Layla was born, my mom gave me a really hard time. Like, she always made me feel like I was not doing it right. My mom battle-fed 5 kids. I nursed all of mine. When Layla was born, she basically told me that nursing was disgusting, and just, I don't know, I felt like everything I did, she had something negative to say about it, and I was trying to do things the right way, but because they weren't the way she did them, she considered them wrong. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. I won't go off on that tangent, but I will say that I wanted to not be that for Layla. So I worked very hard to be supportive, even when I wasn't super excited about whatever decision she was making. Yes. During this time, though, she really bloomed. She loved being pregnant. She was, like, the happiest pregnant person ever. And, yeah. And she went downtown. She took herself downtown and applied for housing and got it. And by November of 2020, she had her own apartment. I didn't want her to leave. I kind of begged her to stay. I really did. I was like, babies are hard. Can you please just stay just for the first 6 months? Like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Please stay. And she didn't want to. Like I said, she wanted to be an adult and out on her own by the time she was 5. She wasn't going to stay. So she gets her apartment, and she furnishes it, and she makes it beautiful, and we have a baby shower, we do all the things, and then Nova Grace is born. And I did not know it was possible to love someone instantly that you did not birth yourself. Like, a grandchild it's the weirdest thing. I can't explain it. I just cannot. It's a feeling that I cannot explain, but I absolutely adore this little girl. She is the sun, moon, and stars. Okay? I got to be there for her birth. It was beautiful. I'm so proud of Layla. She did such a good job. And then she moved in here with me and the boys. My current boyfriend had bought a house where we live now. And this first day Nova Grace was out of the hospital, she had to go to the pediatrician. And they discovered that she was jaundiced and that she would need this, like, very rigorous feeding schedule. And so I said, if you want to come to my house for to get through the weekend, to get through the jaundice, and we'll take turns take shifts or whatever, because we had to feed her every 2 hours, like a specific amount, blah, 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 blah. So Layla packed her stuff up, and her new boyfriend, who was not Nova's dad, and her and the baby moved in here for about 6 weeks, and it was probably the best 6 weeks she and I ever had after her becoming of age.
Huh.
Like we were besties when she was a kid, and then, the hormones kicked in, and we went through, like, a lot of trauma together and all that stuff, and things got real bad between us. And then when Nova Grace came along, and she was here for those 6 weeks, it was legitimately the best 6 weeks we had ever had, and I will forever be grateful for that time. She was amazing. She was fully dedicated to this child and to giving her what she needed and making sure that she had everything, and it was absolutely beautiful to watch. And then about 6 weeks in, she moved back home and went back to work. And this is kind of where I feel like the trouble started. I believe that she began to experience postpartum symptoms, and I think she started to panic a little bit. I feel like felt like she was in over her head. And she goes back to work, and she's cleaning hotel rooms. She loved to clean. She loved to organize. This great job for her. And she was cleaning at a very prestigious hotel room, so she's making good money, benefits, the whole 9 yards. But she was working, like, overworking herself, picking up extra shifts, staying late, etc. And so all of a sudden, I now am raising a baby, and Layla's at work all the time, which I don't have a problem with her working, and I didn't mind helping with the baby, but, like, it was a lot. It was all the time. Like, she rarely had a day off, and I almost felt like she was overcompensating or panicking and not wanting to come home. Like, something weird was going on. And when Nova Grace was 3 months old, we had a vacation set to go up north and kind of show her off to Layla's dad's side of the family. And Layla had, she had time off or whatever, and so we packed up and we went up and we stayed with her father's mother, her paternal grandmother. And about, 3 or 4 days into that trip, my father committed suicide. Yeah.
Wow.
He had been sick, and it had been getting worse and worse and worse, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him, or just didn't care. I don't know. I still don't know. The healthcare system around here has changed a lot since I first moved here, and it's kind of become this ridiculous, but that's a whole other story. He was feeble, and he felt like he was a burden, and I think he kind of, he lost 80% of his hearing. He couldn't see very well. My dad was like a music guy. I told you he was a radio show host, like an online radio show host or whatever. Like, music was his thing. And, like, I remember the day that I had been taking him to all of his appointments and stuff. I remember the day that he got in the car with me and showed me this piece of paper that said that he had lost 80% of his hearing. And I kept it together until I dropped him off, and then I lost it. Because his hearing was everything. Music was everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just, for him, I knew that was devastating. And it was only 6 months later that he, proceeded to take his own life. He didn't want to suffer anymore. He didn't want to be a burden. And it was incredibly shocking to all of us. None of us expected it. None of us saw it coming. Layla and I think, had very similar reactions, and I think we both had very deep, deep grief. My dad was the most consistent male in her life, and she felt very strongly that he was one of the only people in the world that understood her.
So your father commits suicide, and how does Layla react to this?
She withdraws. I withdraw. We both withdraw. We had been out of town, and, like, first and foremost, neither of us wanted to like go home. Like we avoided going home for as long as we possibly could because going home meant him not being there and it being real. And we get home and we try to like pick up the pieces and get ourselves together and move on, but it was rough. We were both in very, very dark places, and she was struggling with postpartum already.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she switched jobs. She was still cleaning hotels, but she went to a different hotel when we got back. And we were sort of like co-parenting with Nova Grace at this point because Smokey, Nova's actual father, like they had broken up while she was pregnant. Like she was very anti him and wouldn't speak to him at all. I did facilitate a few visits between him and his daughter early on, and then, you know, Daddy passes, and within 3 months, she gets a new boyfriend. And this is where things kind of start to go sideways. She loses Daddy. She's dealing with his postpartum, and Michael Thompson comes into her life.
Okay.
And so, like I said, she was working, and I was kind of babysitting while she was working, and my mom would help out sometimes too, and we kind of had a schedule, but all of a sudden, Layla starts messing with the schedule. And there was like 10 straight days where I had the baby. And I remember it was like a Sunday night, and I had like work to do, and things that I needed to do that week, appointments and things. I remember I called her, and we ended up having like this weird argument, because I was like, it's been 10 days, and I have appointments this week, like, you know, I'm going to bring her home to you. And she's, no, I can't, I have to do this, and the third. And I was like, we had an argument about it. Well, it turns out, later on, she told me that the reason that she disappeared for almost 2 weeks, not disappeared because we were in contact every day, but like didn't come around and didn't want nobody at the police, was because she was helping Michael, her words, allegedly, because, you know, again, I wasn't there, but this is what she told me.
Okay.
Was that he had court coming up, and in order to get pretrial release, he had to be clean and sober, and that he had been addicted to heroin, and she helped him detox. So that, you know, 12 to 14 day period that she was sort of absent, he was helping him detox and helping him get things straightened out for his first court appearance, because he had some big, I don't know, big charges or whatever.
Okay.
And I found this very shocking because of my daughter's stance on people who suffer active addiction.
Right.
I remember being very confused and shocked and worried, and she was very defensive about him, so trying to have, like, the conversation about, like, it's great that you got him help and that you helped him and all of that, but, like, you understand that, like, relapse is part of the process, and you can get wrapped up in a lot of things that you don't need to be wrapped up in, and take it from someone who knows, because I've been there, and, like, I tried to have these conversations, but they always ended in arguments. She felt like she was his savior, and she and him and Nova Grace were going to ride off into the sunset and have a happily ever after. That is exactly what she believed.
Let me ask you this. Do you believe that story now? Do you think that's what really was going on, or was it something else?
No, I do believe that story, because
Okay.
you could tell that he wasn't using in those first 6 months. I can almost tell you exactly when he started using again. My mom had bought, maybe it was like 3 or 4 months. My mom had bought trailers. My dad, she sold the house, Dad's insurance money came in, and she bought 3 trailers in a trailer park. She put my niece Trish, which is the kids who she had custody of, their mom, she put her down the street, and she put my daughter Layla and Michael and Nova Grace in the trailer next to Trish, and my mom was like a few houses down the road. sort of like a community where mom could be there to support everybody and everybody could be close and okay, great. I'm pretty sure Michael relapsed during the refurbishing of that trailer. His behaviors changed. His actions changed. And suddenly, like, he didn't have any money. He was working, but never had any money. Yeah. And, like, I knew what all those red flags, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
I never in a million years expected Layla to end up joining him. Like, I really did not see that happening.
When do you think that happened?
I think she started experimenting that summer.
Okay.
2022.
Okay.
I didn't start having concerns until the fall. Now, they lived in that trailer from, like, I don't know, end of February 2022 until October of 2022. And they ended up having to leave the trailer because they stopped paying the bills.
Wow.
She was working, but only part-time at this point. He was working, but neither of them ever had any money, and they weren't paying their bills, and this was falling to my mother, who owned the trailer, but if the lot rent wasn't paid, they were going to take the trailer that she paid however much for, and then paid however much to have refurbished. You know what I mean? So it just got to a point where mom had to sell the trailer and get out from under because she couldn't afford to keep paying their bills for them. And that was really hard. It was hard for mom to do that. But, you know, it just got to a point where, like, I can't afford to take care of you guys like this. You're both working. Like, you've got to pay your own bills. And so they were officially evicted in October of 2022, and I offered them to come stay here. And by then, neither of them was working. By October, they had both quit their jobs. And I said to Layla, you guys can take the basement. You know, you guys can move into the basement. There's one rule. One of you has to either go to school or go to work. One rule.
Okay. How did the two of them meet in the first place?
They went to school together. They had known each other for years.
Okay. All right.
And actually, they had, like, a very short period of dating a couple years earlier. Like, a very short-lived fling. And then he showed back up many, many moons later. I don't know. It was crazy.
Okay.
So I told her, you can move into the basement. One of you has to either go to school or go to work. Like, Opie can't be taking care of everybody. Like, at this point, I'm still grieving my father's death. Opie's literally taking care of all of us. Like, financially. Just him. It was rough. And she flipped out on me. She was like, I'm your daughter. How could you? And I was like, how could I what? I'm offering you the basement. Just one of you has to have a job. I'm not asking you to pay anything. One of you has to be working so that you're working towards something. You can't just move into the basement and not do anything ever. Like, you gotta have a plan. She was not happy about that. So she and Michael moved in with Michael's mom, and she brought Nova Grace over here and asked me, can she stay here full time until we get our housing situated, which, you know, Layla was just going to apply for the same apartments that she had been in. And I said, yeah, of course she can stay here. I was expecting, like, from October to maybe Christmas. I was not expecting what came next at all. Mm-hmm. She dropped Nova off, and from then on, didn't really see her except on, like, video chat until after Christmas. And that's when I started getting concerned, because Layla would not come over. Or if I, you know, said, hey, let's go here, or let's do this, or, you know what I mean, when I tried to, like, set up, like, play dates and, like, times that we could all be together and she could see Nova, like, she avoided me. And I started being very concerned. And I texted a few of her friends and asked them, what's going on? Is she on something? Is she taking something? She had been rapidly losing weight. And when I did see her, the very few times I did see her, she was nauseous all the time. She was constantly going to the bathroom to throw up. And I thought that was just really weird. And I was like, you need to go to the doctor. You need to see a specialist. Like, that's not normal. I never saw her nod out. I never saw, like, I don't know. I never saw anything weird, but she lost a lot of weight. She was puking all the time. I thought she was sick.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, something weird was going on with her body, and she needed to go to a doctor, and she wouldn't listen to me. In February of 2023, Michael got arrested. He had Layla's phone on him because we were paying for Layla's phone between me and my mom, and she had like 100% like unlimited data and calls and all that stuff, and he never had calls or minutes or whatever on his phone. So he had left the house and took her phone with him and left her at the house on Wi-Fi. And when he gets arrested, he gets like minor drug charges, some paraphernalia charges, and they take my daughter's phone as evidence.
Wow.
I don't remember, there was like a third charge, but I don't remember what it was. And they take him to jail. And Michael's mom kicked my daughter out of the house, blamed her for Michael's arrest. I didn't know this for a couple days. Layla and I had been texting back and forth, but she didn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, he starts texting about it. And I'm like, okay, well, like, if you need anything, like, where are you? For one, well, I'm with friends. Okay, well, if you need anything, you know, call me. Like, I'm around. Whatever you need, whatever. The next day, she calls me at, like, 6 o'clock in the morning. And she says, I need you to come pick me up. I haven't slept in 3 days. These people are all crazy. You know, I need you to come get me. I need a shower. I need some sleep. And I was like, okay. I dropped my boys off at school, and me and Nova Grace drove out and picked her up. What I didn't know at the time is that Michael had been bonded, and he was with her.
Okay.
They both get into my car. They both look absolutely miserable and deathly. And I bring them to my house. And they went straight down to the basement. They barely acknowledged Nova. It was so weird. It was weird. It was awful. For the next 3 or 4 days, neither of them smiled. They were always either asleep or, like, they just weren't, I don't know. It was weird. It was the strangest thing ever. She was a shell of herself. She wasn't her. She wasn't her sassy, you know, energetic, lively, funny self anymore. And it was that week that I realized that I had been missing her so much. Like, I missed my daughter. I missed my human, the one that I was used to. And in the last 6 months or so, she had changed so drastically that, like, I was already missing her, you know? And then, like, weird, crazy things started happening. Like, they would come up from the basement, and Layla's face would be like, it would look like she put her hands in an ashtray and then, like, scratched her nose. Like, soot or ashes would be on, like, her face in these weird spots. And I thought that was really weird. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. And then I started finding little pieces of aluminum foil in my garage. And I was like, burnt aluminum foil.
Yeah.
And so I do some research, turns out heroin, the second favorite way for people to use heroin is by smoking it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I had no idea. Hello, doggy. So now I'm all kinds of suspicious, and one night they disappeared. They left. They left the lights on in the basement, the curtain open, and I had gone down, like, I was going down to the garage, but realized that, like, everything was lit up in the bedroom, and they were gone. And I walked into the bedroom and just kind of looked around, and then I walked over to the side table and started grabbing like 30 dishes, bring them upstairs. And I looked down, and there was a drawer in the side table, a very low drawer. And I looked down, and there was a plate, and all of these like powdery substances, multitudes of them, different colors. It was I don't know. I looked down at this thing, and I just kind of panicked. I grabbed the 30 dishes. I pulled my phone out and took a picture, grabbed the dirty dishes, ran upstairs, and waited for Opie to get home from work. And when he did, I was like, I need you to go downstairs and tell me what that is. Like, they left all the lights on, and they left that drawer open, and I don't know what that is. And I said, can you talk to them? Because I don't know what to say, and I'm afraid that I'm going to, like, lose it. And so he tried to talk to them about it when they got back. And she came upstairs and threw the plate in the sink with the stuff on it, and ran it all down and it was like, it was nothing. And, like, tried to play it off like it was absolutely nothing. It was so weird. I still don't know exactly what they were doing, but I watched the substance go down the drain. And she said it was nothing. And I'm like, okay. I don't think I've ever publicly told that part of the story, but that's what happened. It was like Thursday night. And I was like, oh, okay. It was just an awkward, weird moment. And she went back upstairs, and they went to bed. And the next morning, my other son, Elijah, my younger son, he had just maybe 6 weeks earlier been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Like, he almost died. Like, we had spent a week in the hospital. It was awful. And so I was making hot breakfast for him every morning at that point, because he needed to eat certain foods and do the whole insulin stuff and whatever. So I'm making hot breakfast for both my boys before they go to school. And I'm at the stove, and I see out of the corner of my eye Nova on her way down the steps. She's not quite 2 at this point. She's like a month and a half away from being 2. And she's going downstairs to look for her mama. And I just had this feeling, like, you need to go after her. She doesn't need to go down there.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed my older boy, and I said, Rob, can you please watch these pancakes, watch the stove? I need to run downstairs and grab Nova. I don't know what she's doing down there. And I went down there, and she was lying on Michael's chest by the time I got down there, and about 6 inches away from her face on the end table, the same end table with the door from the night before, was a broken piece of mirror and this like purple, like powdery substance. And first I reached down to grab the mirror and get it away from Nova, like it was 6 inches from her face. And as I'm trying to grab for it, Layla practically does a double backflip over them out of the bed and grabs it out of my hand and was like, no, we need that. And I just froze for a minute, and I reached down and picked the baby up and brought her upstairs and took my boys to school. And then when I got back, I'm pretty sure I sent Nova Grace into the bedroom to hang out with Opie. I think he was off that day. And I went outside on the back deck to wait for Layla to come up and smoke, because I knew she would. And about 15, 20 minutes later, she comes upstairs. And I said, okay, now it's time for you to tell me what the hell's going on. And she tells me it's heroin, which ended up being a lie. It was fentanyl.
Okay.
And she tells me that it was a rough conversation. We both cried for the entirety of it, like the full, 2 hours we were out there. And she cried to me and she said, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want Nova to lose me to this thing. Like, I don't want to disappear from her. I want to get better. I want to be better. And I said, okay, well, I'm happy to help you detox downstairs if you want, because I can help you. or I can take you both to like a detox facility, or I can find somewhere for y'all to go so that you can each start your recovery journey and move on from this and be okay. Like, I had all of these options laid out for her, and she just kept saying no, that she had a plan. And her plan was that she was so early in this thing that she still felt like she had control. She still felt like she had control over the situation.
Yeah.
And she said that once they got their apartment, and this is like 8 months after they initially filed to get the apartment, and they still hadn't. I don't know exactly what all was going on with that. But she said that, you know, whenever she got her apartment, she was going to, I don't know, they were going to take turns detoxing. They were going to detox, I don't know, whatever. And there was no talking her out of that. Like, I mean, we talked all of it. We got deep into some stuff, too, like, where she was saying things like, you know, my dad just disappeared on me and I don't want to do that to Nova. And I was like, well, you know, your dad went through a lot. And if you had been with him during his addiction, you would have seen a lot and you'd probably be pretty traumatized. Like, you're traumatized enough from going through the little bit of stuff we went through. And her response to that was, I am glad that I was with you. Like, at least you were there. Rather, you might not have been the best 4 years, but at least you were there. And I was like, I don't know. I feel the opposite. I feel like you were safer. You would have been safer not there, but it was a long, crazy, very deep conversation.
So did they go to detox?
No. They told me they were going to detox each other and help themselves once they got into their new apartment, which was supposed to happen in the next month or so. At that point, I had to tell them that they couldn't stay here anymore. You cannot actively be using drugs in my house, in my garage, in my basement, around. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, the whole conversation came about because you had this particular drug 6 inches from a 2-year-old's face.
Yeah.
You know? Like, and you were both asleep. You don't know that she wasn't going to reach out and touch that. Like, what are you thinking about? So, I also have the boys and all the other stuff going on. Like, and I just had to, like, I can't keep you here if you're going to be actively using. You have to go back to Michael's mom's. Like, I can't have that here. And she knew that she was not going to be able to refrain from using in the house or on the property. Otherwise, she would have, you know, lied and said, oh, we won't. I think she knew that was the best option for everyone at the time, because she really didn't, like, argue. They just went on back to Michael's mom's house. I found out that it was fentanyl from my niece a couple weeks later, because I ended up having to help her detox off the same stuff. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. I thought she was going to die a couple of times. It took 10 days, and it was awful. And apparently Layla and her cousin Trish had been in cahoots during this time and utilizing this particular substance. At this point, I do detox my niece, and I allow her to stay in my basement because she wanted to go to sober living.
Jennifer, I'm going to jump in here. I'm a little worried about our time. We got an hour and a half to go before we're going to have to move. We're going to have to move move this up a little bit. All right. We don't need to get into nieces and things. Just, we want to get this. We want to get to the disappearance. Here's where I want to get. I want to move this up to. So they move out. They go back and live with, I guess, Michael's mother. And how does this all transpire that, from there to where we get to her disappearance, in 2020?
So the same week that I found out that she was using harder drugs than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
she also lost her phone, don't forget. That's kind of important for the missing part.
Yes.
So her phone was taken into custody, and it's in, I don't know, Sullivan County somewhere, logged as evidence. So she and Michael are now sharing a phone. And April, May, June. So 4 months goes by, and things got worse with Layla. Like, she was lying to us more often. She was conning all kinds of family members out of money to feed her habit. She stopped being herself completely. She turned into like a completely different human over the next 4 months. And again, like, I missed the hell out of her. It was crazy. And I got more and more angry and frustrated the more and more I watched her sort of go downhill. Like, it all happened so fast. And I had started having these, like, nightmares and these, like, morning panic attacks where, like, the whole focus was Layla, and is she going to get out from under this? And is something terrible going to happen? Am I going to lose her to this? That kind of stuff. Like, I had, like, weird instincts about it. And then on June 24th, which was a Saturday of 2023, around 9 p.m., I get a message from Michael. But it came through as a message from Layla. So the little bubble on Facebook looks like it's from Layla. I'm cooking dinner, you know, I have a million teenagers in the house, and I wasn't going to check the message. Actually, I was going to wait till after dinner, but I thought, well, maybe she needs me. I clicked the message. It's not Layla, it's Michael, and he's asking me, do I know if Layla's in jail? To which I respond, why would she be in jail?
Right.
Like, I responded with questions. Why would she be in jail? What are you talking about? Why is she not with you? What's going on? And, you know, these are two people that you never see one without the other. They're never separate. They're never apart. They're never not together. It was weird. So I started to, like, panic. And so he never responds back to me at all. And at the time, my niece was downstairs in my basement waiting on a sober living bed. And I ran downstairs and said, hey, I just got this text from Michael. Like, can you, she had an app that told you, like, who got arrested and when and, like, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I said, can you get on the app and look and see if she's had any arrests or anything in the last 24 hours? And then as she's doing that, I'm calling the jails and I'm calling the hospitals. Layla's not at any of them, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe they had some kind of a fight and she took off. I don't know. I go to bed. I wake up at like 6 o'clock that Sunday morning and realize that Layla had texted me that night, and her response was, I'm okay. Like, she must have logged into her account and saw where Michael had asked me that question and saw where I had started to panic and was like, Mom, I'm fine. I'm okay. Don't worry. So I wake up at 6 and I'm like, oh, thank God. And we kind of text back and forth. But at this point, I know that Michael has access to this feed, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to ask her too many questions. At this point, I'm getting the feeling that she doesn't want to be around him because she's answering, like, normally she's pretty detailed about, like, what's going on, even in text, but she's being very short with me with responses. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe she doesn't want him to know where she's at. And I actually had, like, this instant sense of relief. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is where she separates from him, comes home, and we get her the help that she needs, you know?
Yes.
I'm hopeful. So she basically tells me that she's with friends and she's fine, please don't worry. And I was like, okay, you know, I love you, be careful. I fully expect for her to call me at some point and tell me the details of what's going on. So later that night, I get a phone call from Layla's biological father because apparently the boyfriend, Michael, wasn't just messaging me about not knowing where Layla was. He was also messaging Layla's biological father, who was in New Jersey. And, like, how would he know where she is? I don't know. I start getting this feeling that Michael is manipulating us to find her, right? They had a pretty toxic and controlling, crazy relationship. And I start feeling like he's using us and trying to get us worked up and worried in order for us to find her for him. Does that make sense?
It does. I would think the same
I don't want to
thing.
be part of that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like, I don't want to help you. Like, I want to find her, but once I do, I'm not going to tell you about it, bro. Like, stop. So, Monday morning, I start getting text messages from Michael, and they're pretty gruesome. Like, he's going on and on and on about, like, he's really laying it on thick. Like, you don't know what could happen to her out there. She could OD and end up in a river. And, like, he's just going on and on about all the horrible things that could happen to her while she's out there on her own, blah, 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 blah. And I am feeling very manipulated. So I'm just kind of ignoring him. And I'm like, dude, I talked to her 24 hours ago. Like, cut it out. She'll be fine. She's tough. She's strong. She's smart. I'm sure she's fine. Later on that night, I talked to Layla's father in New Jersey again, and we're like, what do we do? Should we go ahead and file a report? Like, it's been, 36 hours maybe since the last time I heard from her, and then I went with that old, it's got to be 48 hours to report. Yeah, I didn't know. That's what I thought. In my head, I thought you needed 48 hours for an adult to be reported. So I said to him, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. will be a full 48 hours since the last time we heard from her. If I don't hear from her by then, you and I will get on 3-way and we'll call KPD and see what we got to do. And he agrees with me. And we both go to bed. Well, at some point during the night, I guess he can't sleep or whatever's going on, he goes ahead and calls KPD, Kingsport Police Department, and he's asked them, can I file a missing persons report on my daughter? Gives them, all the information he can, and oddly enough, they take it perfectly seriously, because I've heard some terrible things about KPD when people try to call people in missing.
Yeah.
But they took it very, very seriously, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, they were knocking on Michael Thompson's door. Detectives were, not even just like officers, but actual detectives were at Michael Thompson's door. Now, I don't know what else might have been going on with Michael particularly. Like, there's a million reasons that might have happened that way. We won't go into those, but they get there, and everybody is complicit. Everybody, they tell the officers what they say, what they think they know, and everyone's acting helpful, and, like, there's no problems, there's no suspicious behavior, but Layla wasn't there, Michael was, his mom was, his brother was, everybody who lived there was home at the time. By the next afternoon...
I have to jump here. I just have to ask, where does Michael say he last saw her? Why was he thinking she was in jail? Where was it established at that time when he last saw her, and where?
Last time Michael actually saw her was on Friday night. Okay. They had an argument. According to what I've been told, he kind of threw her under the bus with his family. He owed somebody in the family money, blamed Layla for not having the money, and got her into some kind of physical altercation with somebody in the family. This wasn't the first time. This had happened before. Okay. Like, these physical altercations would constantly happen with female family members. And it was always Michael throwing her under the bus. This wasn't anything new. Apparently, though, he had said something to her, something along the lines of, like, you need to get together. And I know my daughter. Yeah. I'm sure she was pissed and packed her crap and said, I'll show you. Yeah. I'll get together. I don't need you. Bye. And she went on a mission to show him she didn't need him. And went out. So
did she walk off? Did she drive off? What did he say?
She walked off.
Walked
She
off.
walked off.
All
Now,
right.
they live in the middle of town, like close to downtown, close to everything.
Okay.
Apparently, she did end up with a girlfriend that night, and overnight she was with this one chick. By the next night, she was at some other chick's house, and multiple people saw her there, so that would be Saturday. And then on Sunday, she was at another friend's house, and that's where she texted me from. So sometime during the night, no, by Saturday night, because she texted me at like 11:30 or 12:30 or something on Saturday night. So she had gone to Dude's house, and he had given her a tablet to use because she didn't have a phone. She had left without any phone because, she had been borrowing Michael's or they had been sharing or whatever. And he gave her a tablet to use. The first thing she did was log into her Facebook and see my messages and contact me. That was all verified to actually have been her through like IP addresses and all the things. They interviewed the guy multitude of times. His story always stays the same, whatever. The conversation I had with her Sunday morning happened on that tablet, and at some point in the next 24 hours, there was some kind of altercation that took place at Dude's house, and some of Layla's things were stolen, and she was accused of stealing, and she took off and ended up at the Americourt Hotel on Monday night, which would have been the 26th of June, 2023.
Okay.
So they had her on camera at the Americourt, sort of like running around, being a little out of it, knocking on doors, looking like she didn't quite know where she was supposed to be.
What do you think would have drawn her to that place?
Drugs.
Okay. So she had been there before?
I'm sure she had.
Okay.
I don't know for certain, but I'm sure she had.
Okay.
So that's a what you call a track hotel. We've got several of them here in town. The Americourt's definitely one of them. It's an extended stay. A lot of people live there. They pay. I don't know. It's weird. Very expensive to stay there monthly, but they do it anyway. I don't understand it, but they do. And it was summertime, so like there were lots of people outdoors that like could vouch for the fact that she had been there and like what all went on. And at some point, an employee did approach her, and they were like, "Ma'am, like you're disturbing the guests. Like you have to calm down and figure out where you're supposed to be. Otherwise, we're going to have to put you on the trespass list, and that means that you can no longer enter this property ever."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Okay, sorry," and took off and hid in the laundry room. At some point, the police pulled into the parking lot, not for her, for a completely different situation. She doesn't know that, though, and we think she took off into the woods thinking that the cops were there because of her, because she was still there and still hadn't figured out where she was supposed to be. No one saw her come back from the woods. She was seen the next morning leaving the woods, crossing this field, and walking up to, there's a warehouse. So, like, you have, the hotel is right there at the highway, and behind it there's woods, and then there's like a football field size field, and then there's a warehouse. And behind the warehouse there's this walking, biking, hiking trail that goes straight through town, and it's called the Green Belt, and it's the fastest way to get anywhere in town on foot. So these men are on their way in for their shift at the warehouse, and they see Layla coming across the field. She approaches them and tries to bum a cigarette. Does anybody have a cigarette? Nobody had one. And they said she was very polite and very upbeat, and she was like, "Okay, thanks guys, have a great day," and started walking in the opposite direction from the hotel towards the Green Belt, and apparently was never seen again.
How was this all eventually? So this is a story. We'll get into that a little more deeper. But how was this all? How long did it take to establish the story you told right there? Did it take a couple days, a week? How many people had to get out there to put this whole entire thing together?
So luckily my niece Trish actually got that first timeline over the weekend from Friday to Sunday. By Monday morning, Trish knew exactly where Layla had been Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We just didn't know where she was on Monday. And we gave all of that information to the detectives on Tuesday, and they followed all of that. So by Tuesday afternoon, we discovered that she had been at the Americourt on Monday night, but we did not know about the gentleman that saw her the next morning yet.
Huh.
I think Wednesday, somebody gave me the room number that she was supposed to have been visiting, supposedly, because there were like a whole lot of people who saw her, and quite a few that even talked to her on Monday night while she was there. And so somebody had given us like the room number they saw her go into earlier that day. And so I actually sent my ex-boyfriend Mike and his friend up to the hotel to try and find her.
Okay.
And at this point, we think she's laid up at that hotel still. We're thinking that she's just hiding from Michael, doesn't want to be bothered with him. And I send my ex-boyfriend, like I had Nova, Opie was at work, so I send my ex-boyfriend up there. I said, listen, because her and him were still in contact, you know, like he would give her rides places or take her to the grocery store or bring her food or whatever it was. They still had a relationship. And so I called him, I said, can you go? You know, she's officially found as a missing person. I've been told that she's staying at this one room. Can you guys go check it out and see if you can find her? And he was like, Jen, what do you want me to do when I find her? And I was like, well, you can ask her to come home, but if she doesn't want to, and I don't think she will, please just make sure she's fed and had some food and that she looks okay. You know, lay eyes on her and tell her I love her, and if she needs me, she can call. And he said, okay. So he goes up to the Americourt. They pull up towards the back because apparently that's where the room was supposed to be. He sends his friend up the stairs. The friend's banging on the door. He's sitting kind of watching the parking lot. And the way he said this happened, he said it was like Michael and his friends came out of the shadows as though they had been staking the place out all day.
Wow.
And so my ex Mike and his friend and Michael Thompson and two of his friends, they all came together in the parking lot, had a long conversation, and then started canvassing the area themselves. Okay. So they're talking to the witnesses at the Americourt, and they go back and they talk to the people at the warehouse, and they walk down the green belt, their stores and all kinds of stuff. They walk down, they're talking to everybody, asking, is there camera footage? Have you seen this girl? Like, all the things. They spent hours and hours and hours doing this until it got dark. Michael rendezvous with my ex, Mike, and says, the guys at the warehouse saw her, but he was saying that they saw her Wednesday morning, when in reality they actually saw her Tuesday morning. So basically, Michael is telling my Mike, Layla was seen this morning at that warehouse, blah, 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 blah. And also, the lady at the ice cream shop saw her and she had no shoes on, and she let her come in and gave her something to drink and gave her some ice cream. And then she went to the Five and Below and blah, 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 blah. And then my Mike says to me, I don't know what all he's on, but he's definitely not sober, Jen. So I don't know what to make of what he's saying. Yeah, right. But I'm giving you these details because this is what he said he figured out.
Right.
I don't believe any of it. I think it's all. I believe none of it.
Okay.
A month later, maybe a little more. 5 weeks later was Layla's 21st birthday. And that was a Saturday, and by the following Monday, we had sat down with investigators who told me that the warehouse thing was true, but it happened on Tuesday morning, not Wednesday morning.
Right.
And they also did believe that Layla was at the ice cream store a little bit, but there's 4 to 6 hours missing. She was seen at the warehouse between 6 and 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and then apparently not seen again until she gets to the ice cream store between 12 and 1 p.m. that day. So where was she for those 6 hours? Nobody knows, right? Well, months later, we found out that it wasn't actually Layla at the ice cream store, and we had been chasing our tails with that information.
How did you find out? How did that get determined? Did somebody actually track down the woman that it really was, or what happened?
Yes. The law enforcement tracked down the woman who it actually was, and then they saw her on camera all over the place that day in that, like, strip mall. She had taken off. She had an argument with her husband. It was like a domestic violence situation. She took off without her shoes and ended up kind of wandering the greenbelt. Ended up outside the ice cream store. The lady at the ice cream store took pity on her, fed her, gave her something to drink, etc. And then she was seen going into the Five and Below. And then she was seen using a phone at the gas station across the street trying to call for a ride. And she had blonde hair and was wearing similar clothing to my daughter, and they both had no shoes on when they were last seen. So
how far is this ice cream place from the Americourt?
It's a 15 to 20 minute walk.
All right, so drive is pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you did tell me in a prior conversation that there might have actually been another hotel mixed in here. Something you said that. Was it called the Western or something like that?
The West Side Inn is rumored to be another place she was seen later on the 27th, but I have not been able to verify that with anybody.
Okay.
There's also a couple other residences that are rumored that she was there on the 27th in the evening, but none of that is...
no facts to back that up at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing to back that up. There's nothing to verify any of that. If it is true, law enforcement isn't telling me.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a handful of rumors about what happened later that night. There's a lot of rumors about what happened to Layla altogether.
I want to go back and ask about the Americourt place, the hotel, the motel, for a bit. Any idea about why she chose to go there? And we don't need to get into names. I know there's certain things you can't say, but you said she had been there before, but I guess she might have known somebody she knew was there or something. Is that and what did, if you can say, what did this person think? I mean, this person, he or she saw Layla there, but then Layla didn't come back. Did these people not care? Can you expound on that a little bit, if you're allowed?
I believe that she got a ride from a guy who got her out of the other guy's house after, like, she was apparently accused of stealing from somebody in the house, and things were stolen from her, and this guy offered to kind of get her out of there. He gives her a ride to the Americourt. He doesn't have a room there himself. He's actually, like, using someone else's room. I don't know why he has a key or whatever. The other guy who actually is renting the room was at work. But he and Layla go to this room. I don't know if they went there to score. I don't know for certain that they went there to use. I know that she needed an escape from where she was because there was a lot going on. Right. It's very possible, considering what witnesses said, that she did use while she was there, because witnesses claimed that she looked completely out of her mind, that she was running around acting paranoid. She couldn't remember what room she was supposed to be in. She kept asking for different names. She kept knocking on all the wrong doors and, like, disturbing people. And then when she was approached by, like, an employee, she went and, like, hid in the laundry room. And witnesses said that she was, like, crouching down and, like, and this laundry room has, like, all these giant glass windows. Like, you can see directly into it from almost anywhere in the courtyard. And she's, like, trying to hide behind things, and she's being very obvious about her paranoia. Like, there's a lot going on.
Right, right.
And then she took off. So,
And these people didn't care that she knew. I mean, I know they're shady people, but did they say where they thought she was going? Did they think she was coming back? Did she say she was going to walk somewhere? Anything like that?
Somebody told me that he said that she said that she had to go out to the parking lot and deal with something.
I see.
She didn't say what. She was very vague about that. And she went out to the parking lot and never came back. And at some point, he just gave up and left. Like, he assumed that whoever she needed to deal with out in the parking lot, Layla just left with them. And so he just left. That's the story I was told. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know 100% if that's the case, but that's what I was told. That he just, like, figured that whatever she was, quote-unquote, dealing with in the parking lot took her away from there, and he got tired of waiting for her and left.
All right. Okay, yeah. And we know this person's name, and you don't want to say it, right? Correct.
No.
You've told me the person's name, and I'm not going to be. Yeah. Gotcha.
Because I don't know. I don't want to destroy anybody's life that doesn't deserve it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm very. Yeah.
Totally fine. And I know what his name is, and I will not be mentioning it either. And anything after this, that's always up to the guest. I totally understand. All right. So the other question I want to ask is, I know this maybe, being that there was a confusion between Layla and this other woman who was at the ice cream place, are we sure that the woman who got the cigarette from the warehouse guys wasn't also this woman from the ice cream place, or could it actually have been some third woman? And are we sure that woman is Layla, who that morning of the 27th?
Law enforcement feels very strongly that it was, in fact, Layla. The tattoos, her specific tattoos were mentioned. Because she was wearing a tank top and you could see all of them. They feel very, very strongly that it was her, but they don't have any video evidence for 100% sure that it was. So I'm going with what they believe.
Okay. And if we are to believe that she walked off, of course, we're open to interpretations. And as you've already said, there's stories out there. I hope to touch upon maybe a couple of them if you want to before we're done here. But when she left, what did she have with her, and what did she leave behind? Do we know?
Apparently she had nothing with her except her clothing. She didn't even have a cigarette. The witnesses said, like the guys at the warehouse, one of them said that she looked, before she crossed the field, it looked like she was looking around in the grass for something. I think she was looking for either her pack of smokes or her vape. And that's why she ran across the field to ask for a cigarette. Like, she maybe just woke up and was like, oh crap, I don't have a cigarette, I don't know where my vape went, maybe this guy's got one, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's my assumption. I don't know for sure, but that's my assumption. And then
okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. So we do have this story that she was walking off toward this path, this green belt. Any witnesses, believable, say they saw her walking on this path? I guess people use it to walk, maybe, bike or something. Any people, it seems like if it's the morning and the sun's up, that's people when people like to do those things. Anybody reports seeing her? Any witnesses ever come forward?
Absolutely no one has come forward claiming they saw her on the greenbelt that morning, which has always befuddled me because it's a really heavily trafficked area, especially in the middle of June. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the fact that no one ever saw her on the greenbelt at all that day, it just kind of blows my mind. It makes me wonder, did she even utilize the greenbelt? Did she go back around the warehouse and back to the Americourt? That's very possible. She had nothing on her. Whatever she did have on her, she left in that room. She was barefoot. She was wearing black leggings and a white tank top and had literally nothing else on her person. So very possible she went back to the Americourt to try and find her stuff, to try and figure out what room she had been in and left it in, and you know what I mean? Now, as far as what she had with her, I don't know. Nobody knows. It was never recovered.
Okay. Did you ever get any of her stuff back? Did you ever get any of her stuff back that was at the Americourt?
No.
None.
Nope. None. And I never got any of her stuff back from Michael's either.
Any searches done? Once this came out, she was seen walking that direction toward the Greenbelt. What can you say about searches that were done in that area? How complete were they? How many people?
Oh, they did some big ones in that area specifically. So I'm going to say August. You'll have to look up the exact date, but in August they did like a huge search of the entire wooded area around the Greenbelt for several miles in both directions. They also used drones and like special AI software to look for anomalies and did find a couple sets of deer bones. So apparently those drones and their AI work pretty well, but nothing having to do with Layla was found along the Greenbelt at all.
Being that I've never been there, but you have been there, maybe a few listeners maybe live in the area, have been in that area. Would you say this area is tough to search, easy to search, or a lot of woods? Or what would you say?
The Greenbelt itself isn't so bad. Anywhere else, the places that we've had to go and search, we live in the mountains. Mm-hmm. Like the terrain is rocky and hilly, and there's ravines and ridges, and so a lot of the other property is in different places that I have gone searching based on different rumors and different things people have said have been very difficult to search.
Okay, so this has been wide-ranging, not just around the Americourt, but elsewhere. Searches have been done elsewhere then, according to tips or rumors, things like that.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if Layla had ever walked? I mean, I know she'd been in the Americourt, like you said before, but had she ever traveled the Greenbelt before, biking or walking, anything? Was she familiar with it? She had.
Oh, yeah. She was super familiar with it. Absolutely.
Okay. Just in casual use, and, could she have used that path if she wanted to walk to Michael's, or she wanted to walk to your place, or not? What?
She could have used the path to walk to Michael's. I mean, you can get to basically anywhere in Kingsport from that path, and that's like the fastest walking way to get to pretty much anywhere. You can't get to my house on the Greenbelt because I'm actually a town over. Okay. But you could walk, like, the end of the Greenbelt on my side of town is like a 3-minute drive. So, I mean, technically she could get pretty close to me if she just followed the Greenbelt.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Now, regarding Michael, was he helpful? Did he take a part in any searches? Did he seem to want to find Layla? We'll get into some of the things later regarding the Cash App and everything. But regarding just the initial looking around and him questioning people and being the man in your life, talked to him that very day on the 27th, I guess it was. Was his impression that Michael really was interested in finding her and cared? What can you say about his immediate reaction?
He absolutely did look like he really wanted to find her. He launched his own investigation, and according to law enforcement, like everywhere they went, Michael had either been there or was on his way there. Like he was basically following all of Layla's footsteps around the same time that law enforcement was. And he was seen for weeks after, still searching for her, still looking for her. I believe he did start to spiral, and he's a struggling active addict at the time, right? Yeah, right? So I can't imagine, like, I have some empathy at least for him, because, I can imagine how painful and how awful and scary that must have been for him. I won't lie, in the first few months, I did have my suspicions about him personally, but over time, I don't think he ever found her. I think he continued to look for her, and he never actually found her. I really don't believe, he would have had to have found her after she was reported missing.
Yeah.
And in order to do something for her, he would have had to have found her after she was reported missing, after speaking to law enforcement, have done something to her, done something with her remains, and then to go the next 6-8 weeks continuing to search for her.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's
especially
highly
when
unlikely.
you're a struggling addict.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's just a lot. I just don't know that I can believe that.
I agree with you. It sounds, it stretches the imagination. It's not, of course, it's physically possible, but what we think we know about people and things, that seems very unlikely. Right. I agree with you. Having done this for 9 years, I agree with you. It's not usually the behavior of people. People who usually have to do things, are suspects in disappearances, they move on and act like the person never existed. It's, usually. All right.
Yeah.
Did you ever speak to Michael once one-on-one about Layla and his attitude toward her disappearance? And once again, you don't have to use any names, but did he ever offer up an idea of what he thought happened, if you ever got to speak to him one-on-one?
I only had one phone conversation with him since Layla's gone missing, and that was several months later. We did text a lot in the beginning. I struggle because Michael has a habit of lying.
Yeah.
In my experience is that I have a hard time believing pretty much anything he says, especially when he is heavily using like that.
Yeah.
His stories change, his ideas change. The few times I did say, what would you do if you were me? Where would you look if you were me? He said bodies of water.
Okay.
And lots of the bodies of water around here actually have been searched by local individuals who have different certifications and underwater robots and but nothing has been found so far. But Michael, it's hard with Michael because he also sort of, in my opinion, I don't want to make him out to be a monster, but he kind of took advantage of the situation in a lot of different situations. From what I had been told secondhand now, because I wasn't present for a lot of this stuff, but I had been told several different stories about him telling different stories about what happened to Layla, and in half of the stories he's complicit, or she overdosed and I left her there, or he claims that he was the last one to be with her, and he has a breakdown, and I don't know, why would you implicate yourself? None of it makes any sense to me. And in the other half of the stories, he'll say that something along the lines of I trusted her with someone that I trusted and shouldn't have, or I don't know. The story, and they're all different stories, and they're all. I got text messages from people that told me that he was trying to sell her food stamps during the investigation. And again, this is secondhand. I do have a few screenshots of him actually texting other people and asking, hey, do you want to buy these?
Okay.
But, and then when people were she's missing, no, I don't want them. That's crazy. If I get caught using her card, people will think I've done something to her. People's reaction to that were what, dude? No. And then, again, secondhand, I have been reached out to and told that shortly after the offer to sell the food stamps, he would call the same people and tell them that they found her and she wasn't alive and the investigation is over. And according to these people, he acted it out. He had just gotten the phone call and cried and sobbed and was hysterical and like really legitimately convinced people that it was true. And they would call me and they were crying and they would, oh my God, son, are you okay? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, Layla said they found her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
It was insane. And the only thing that I can think is that he was trying to put these people's minds at ease so he could sell the thing that he was trying to sell.
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't know, but once again, I'm trying to get inside the head of an addict is difficult.
I know.
It's difficult. But also though, there is this Cash App story too, right?
Yes.
There's that. Why don't you tell everybody about that as well? Kind of along the same lines, I guess.
Layla was missing on the 27th. A couple of weeks in, I am following up on leads that I'm getting from the internet. And I picked up one of Layla's oldest friends, Jake. And Jake and I are going around, we're putting up flyers, and we're talking to different people who have claimed that they may have seen her since the 27th. And I'm sitting in the Travelers Inn parking lot. I get a text message from Layla's dad's girlfriend, and she's like, I'm getting Cash App requests from Layla's account. And I'm like, what? And so she sends me screenshots. And sure enough, she's getting Cash App requests from Layla's account. I was like, holy crap, what is happening? So I start sending $1 or $2 or whatever and asking questions in the memo line. Send $1, baby, is that you? And she's responding as if it's her. And it goes back and forth from being her to being somebody who's claimed that they have taken her and that they will release her as long as we pay X amount of dollars. And so I'm like, I need proof of life. Call me. Layla has my number memorized. She's had it memorized for more than a decade. I haven't changed it. Call me. I want to hear your voice. I will send however much money. I will get money to get you back. But I need to hear your voice first. They won't let me call Mama. And I swear, whoever was on the other end of this was copy and pasting old text messages between us because it legitimately sounded like her. It was insane. There was a moment, honest to God, there was a moment that I worried that she and Michael were working together to scam us into sending money. Honest to goodness. It only lasted half a second. But there was a moment when I wondered, you know what I mean? Because these messages sounded so much like her. So I go into the Travelers Inn to have the conversation with the person. There was a manager that thought that they saw Layla, and she's like, oh yeah, I saw her, and I know that it's her because she had the little girl with her. And I was like, yeah, no, that means it definitely wasn't her because the little girl's been with me. And then I tell the manager, I'm like, but I'm getting these weird messages from her Cash App account, and the lady's like, it's a scam. It's a scam. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, it's a scam. Haven't you seen online? It's happening all over the place. They're hacking into people's Cash Apps, and they're claiming that, their loved one is, been kidnapped and blah, 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 blah. The loved one's in the shower or at the doctor or whatever, and people are freaking out and sending all of this money on Cash App. And I was like, yes, but it's too coincidental because my daughter has actually been missing for 2 weeks now. That's a little weird. No, that's strange. So we send everything we have to law enforcement. And at first, even they were like, oh, it's a scam. And we were like, seriously, dude? For real? And it took several days of going back and forth with whoever was on the other end of this thing before, law enforcement was finally like, okay, all right, we're going to trace it, right? Because it kept happening. And crazy things were being said. If you don't send the money within 15 minutes, you're going to find her chopped into pieces and crazy, awful things like that. So, all right, let the dog in. Or out. It took a month. It took a whole month for them to actually be able to get through all the red tape to trace where the Cash App stuff was coming from. And they got the information in the middle of the night. It was right before Layla's vigil, so it had to be like one of the first few days in August. And they got a warrant, and the address that the Cash App requests were coming from was Michael Thompson's, his Wi-Fi, and his device.
Oh my goodness.
So they
my goodness.
Yeah. They did a whole raid. They were at his house. TBI and KPD were both at his house for like 18 hours. They had him in for questioning for that full 18 hours. And they took samples and a bunch of evidence out of the house. I'm sure some of Layla's things. And it took a whole year for those samples to even be processed in the lab. So that was fun. But yeah,
Did he ever own up to it?
He still says it wasn't him. Are you
He
kidding me?
does.
He signed a plea deal, so he had to admit some type of guilt. He did very recently sign a plea deal, but like I promise you, when he gets out, like all the way, he's still going to deny that it was him.
Wow. So all the while, so he trying to look for her, but at the same time is using the Cash App and trying to get money.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess if you're that desperate for the substance that keeps you going, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was like the beginning of August. August 5th was her 21st birthday. We had a candlelight vigil. That Monday, this would have been the 7th. We sat down with detectives, and that's when they told us that they believed that the marble slab ice cream store thing was true, and that the warehouse workers definitely did see her and all that stuff. And then it was November when I found out for certain that the marble slab wasn't actually real. And that really kicked my butt.
I bet.
It did, because we have been going in that direction for so long that I felt like we wasted months,
Yes.
I felt like we wasted a very long time going in the wrong direction.
Now, of course, like we said, there's some people, names we can't, we can't talk about and everything. But to your knowledge, have police spoken to these people? To your knowledge, or do you know if they've been forthcoming? Have they cooperated with police? Do you know anything about any of that?
I know that everyone of interest has been questioned as of now. I know that new persons of interest come about pretty regularly.
Okay.
I know that they are still working hard on her case. I've been real quiet lately because it's been very difficult for me because there are active things going on with her case that I'm not allowed to talk about, and it's hard for me to get in front of a camera and make videos and hide things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't love being in this position. It makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that I do fully believe in TBI and KPD and their ability to close this thing eventually. Our investigators are really invested. And I'm very blessed to have that. I know that I am, because I've talked to so many families that have had the opposite experience. And, law enforcement just didn't seem to give a crap. So I know that I'm very, very lucky that that is not the case with Layla.
You had brought up we had talked about, you had mentioned, and I said would come back to it, regarding lots of stories. I'm not saying you have to give any examples, and really I don't like to do that because my experience, you start talking about rumors and stories, you only get more of them. But do you have any idea where these stories are coming from, where they originate? Are you ever able to trace these stories back to their source? Because I know they've been wide-ranging.
They are wide-ranging. I'm going to say that probably 70% of the stories are that she overdosed and was disposed of, right? But if depending on who you talk to, the place and people change, okay? And that's, like maybe 70% of the stories. The other 30% is that she was, like, assaulted and beaten until she could no longer live. And again, depending on who you talk to, it's a different set of people. As far as like the overdose stories, those also, like 50% of those, she was sexually assaulted and then overdosed. And depending on who you talk to, the names change. So
do you know where these stories are? You ever, even just one of them, traced back to the source? Is the source Michael? Is it the source these people who can't be named, friends of Kayla's? And are you able to do that with any of them?
I mean, I have not personally been able to trace anything back to anyone who claims to actually have been there personally.
Okay. All right. Now, somebody else that came up, and this is another missing woman, Holland Snap.
Yeah, so that's a whole other story.
Yeah, well, we have some time here. So, when Layla went missing, when did her name first come up? And what do you think about it? Anything along those lines, if you can say.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of young kids are considered missing around here, and a lot of them have ran off or taken off or are running from charges and stuff like that. When Holland's case hit the news, I just felt immediately that it was different than that. She's 19 years old, and she's the same height and weight as my daughter.
Wow.
4 foot 10 inches tall and about 100 pounds, right? Okay. And that was the first thing that drew me to the case, was that's crazy. She's the exact same height and weight, like that. Now the hair color and eye color are different, but the same, 4'10", that's a really specific height.
Yeah.
Come on, that's a tiny person.
It is.
And they're small enough that they can be passed off like children. So my initial thoughts, this was October, so this is 4 months later, my initial thoughts was trafficking. That somebody is seeking out small women.
Yeah. And
trafficking them. I reached out to the family pretty quickly, and offered my support. And I have been working with her foster mom ever since. Leslie's really amazing. But then new information, pretty quickly through the grapevine and all that stuff, I was given a lot of information. There was a witness who, a night in October, and I don't know the exact dates. I always get them mixed up, so I'm not even going to try. But one night in October, somebody went into the house of a man named Steve Linkus. His name is being talked about all over the place, so I don't have to hide it.
Okay.
He's a 50-some-odd-year-old man, and apparently this witness saw Holland on the couch in the basement, beaten black, blue, and bloody. It's been said that she was barely breathing and making gurgling sounds. It's pretty gruesome with what has been said by this witness. The witness kind of took off. They they just took off. Nobody knows what became of Holland after that. Now, this is another situation where, there's not a lot of proof. There's not a lot of physical evidence backing anything up. There's one witness who says X, Y, Z, and I only personally know so much. I'm sure that there's been a lot more investigating since I was given that information, and I just don't know everything. But it almost seems like this Steve Lincoln's character caused a lot of harm to Holland, and she didn't survive it. Does it connect to Layla? It absolutely could. It's very possible that, because they were running in similar circles, and I know that, Holland knew a lot of people that Layla knew. I don't know for certain that they ever met each other, but I know that they were spending time with similar people.
Is one of those similar people possibly the person you can't name? He's a guy that you can't name, that maybe Layla and Holland could have both known him?
It's very possible, yes.
Okay. Holland have any connections to the Americourt or any area around there?
That I don't know for certain.
Okay.
I know that she grew up in foster care and was adopted. I think she was 11. I don't want to get it wrong, but I think she was 11 when she was officially adopted. And she was in a loving family until she, turned 18. And at that point, I believe she went back to live with some biological family members. And when she actually went missing, according to what people say, she had some kind of argument with her aunt that she was living with. And when she took off, she ended up at this man's house, shacked up with him. And she was 19 years old, 4'10", maybe 100 pounds. And he was 50-something. So, I feel like that's somebody taking advantage of somebody to me.
Okay.
That's how I see that.
Okay. Yeah.
But
if you can say, if you want, Holland's family think that Layla and Holland could be connected somehow? Do you
my opinion, I'm going to give you my opinion.
Yeah,
my opinion, the only way I feel like they could maybe possibly be connected is if the story about Layla overdosing, or the multiple ones about Layla overdosing and then being discarded are true. Is it possible that this man that hurt Holland reached out to whoever disposed of my daughter and said, hey, I have a problem, can you help me with the problem? That's where my mind goes. I don't know that to be true. This is an opinion, fully an opinion, but that's where my mind goes. If they're connected, I feel like that would be the only way. That, this guy, hey, I know so-and-so got rid of a body, or I've heard so-and-so got rid of somebody, and obviously it's been 4 months and they still haven't been found. Maybe they can help me out. But that's just me. That's the way I see it.
Okay. All right. And would you say to this day the police department fairly receptive? If you call them or something, you have a good relationship with them? Continue.
Yes. I do. I do fully believe that.
Okay. We talk about the Americourt, and of course you did say there was video of Layla going door to door or something like that. Has that ever been made public? Have you actually seen it, or is that something they're keeping secret, or what?
I didn't get to see it. And here's the fun part. And it's messed up, and it's kind of a mistake on law enforcement's part. I'll call it what it is.
Okay.
But they went up there that Tuesday. They looked at the footage. They saw her. They did not request a copy of the footage that day. They went back on Friday and requested a copy of the footage, and it had been erased already. Apparently, they don't pay to back anything up. They only have footage for 24 hours and it gets cleansed or whatever. to save storage, and unless you save it within that 48-hour period, it's gone. I never got to see it. Law enforcement saw it, but they didn't get to get a copy of it, unfortunately. Yeah, that's aggravating.
Yeah. Okay. I guess what we're also saying here is if they have video there, I guess no video shows, like you said, is it the possibility that Layla came back to the Americourt? She went on to the Greenbelt, but maybe, I guess no video actually showed that, or maybe it got missed or got erased or something like that.
Absolutely possible. And there's a service road where she could have hit the Greenbelt and only been on the Greenbelt for a moment and then hit the service road, and that goes back up and around to the hotel. So there's so many possibilities on, how. And then, as far as, the rumors and things, if you listen to the rumors, there's, 3 different properties that she supposedly was on the 27th in the evening time. But there are 0 rumors that explain where she was for, 12 hours in between.
Right.
There's no one that has come forward and said, I saw her after 7 a.m., right? Now, there's been lots of people who said, I heard she was here and this happened, and I heard she was there and that happened, or, you know what I mean? But even those stories don't start until after 6 p.m. that night. So if any of them are correct, where the crap was she for 12 hours?
Right, because what you story told earlier, it sounds like she just kind of came out of the woods or something. Right?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. And then, let me just ask you this. What is your level of confidence in the actual story that she walked off to the Greenbelt? You're pretty sure about that? Any ambiguity on that? Do you believe that actually happened? Of course, as we know, witnesses sometimes get things wrong, but you operate today in 2025 as if that is the last time that people saw her.
Yes, I do. I know that it's there, that there's a slight possibility that it wasn't her, but as of right now, the way that I operate is that was the last time anyone saw her. Okay. Yes.
All right. What's the last 2? Of course, I think it's a question I ask everybody, but it's somewhat obvious before I get to the question. How tough have the last 2 years been, Jennifer?
I'm grieving backwards. That's what this is. I'm grieving backwards. When it started, I didn't believe it. I fully believed that my daughter would come home. I never imagined that this would happen to me. And I held on to the hope that she was alive out there somewhere for a long time. Today I hang on to a tiny little mustard seed, but I just cannot believe that she would go almost 2 years without reaching out and asking about her daughter. And it feels like grieving backwards. When someone passes, when someone that you love, even a parent, a child, a sibling, whoever, it's a shock. And then you slowly, come out of the fog. Whereas for me, this has been a slow burn. It's unbelievable. And then slowly you start to believe it. And then slowly the fog rolls in. And every day it just gets darker. It gets worse every day rather than, getting better.
What do you look at when you look at Layla? Of course, like you said, she went downhill so fast. I have to ask, do you pin that on Michael? If I can ask, because you said, of course, this is a disappearance podcast, but obviously a lot of parents out there who have daughters, maybe they're worried about, and as you stated, you being Layla's mother, of course she had dyslexia. She had a job, was making good money, and then, like you said, things seem to go downhill so fast. And is there any, something that could have been different, or do you pin this all on Michael? How do you feel about it now?
The reality is that my daughter was a grown adult and she made her own choices. But I will say that, yeah, if she had never gotten with Michael, we probably would not be here having this conversation today. Now, she may have eventually found her way to drugs regardless, but I don't think she'd be missing. I think that, I don't know, do I blame him? I don't know that it's a blame thing.
Okay.
It's a cause and effect thing. You know, if he hadn't entered her life, she would still be here somewhere. And that's how I feel about it.
Because
I think he personally carries some guilt as well. I'm not gonna lie. Like I in my opinion, I think he carries a lot of guilt too. Allegedly, he's almost OD'd a handful of times in the year that he was free before they finally arrested him for the cash up stuff. And one of the times was in a Walmart, and the whole world saw it. Wow. He spiraled, so quickly and so hard, and I really do feel like he also carries, a certain amount of guilt.
Mm-hmm. Because as you stated, you were under the impression that Layla, of course, had always talked very negatively about addicts.
Yeah.
And that's probably maybe the part you're probably most stunned at.
Yes. It was shocking. Absolutely. It blew my mind. The whole thing blew my mind. And then, again, it happened so fast. From the time that I knew for certain what was going on with her to the time she disappeared was maybe 4 months. And I was, gearing up for battle. I knew that this was going to be hard. It was going to be the hardest thing I had to do. I knew I needed to find a way to be supportive without enabling. I was doing research. I was looking into things. I was, prepping myself to deal with this situation and to be, as good of a mom as I could be under the circumstances. And then she was just gone. Yeah. She never got the opportunity to even try to get clean. She never got the opportunity to drive me crazy for years or disappear for a week and then pop back up and scare the shit out of me. You know what I mean? She was just gone.
Yeah. What have your other children said about this? If you can speak for them, if you feel comfortable doing that, what have your other kids, who are all younger than Layla, have said about this?
Robbie, my older boy, and Layla were very, very close. And I think he likes to imagine that she's out there living somewhere. And I worry that if we find her and that's not the case, that it's going to crush him. And then my younger son, Eli, and Layla, he's the baby, she's the oldest. They're 8 years apart. They weren't super close. I think that Eli worries more about me and, what is becoming of me and the changes he's seen in me than anything else. He's kind of a little bit of a mama's boy. I hate to say that. He's going to be so embarrassed if he hears that. But he is, and he loves his mama, and he wants me to be okay, and he worries about me. And, again, he didn't have the same relationship with Layla that the older kids did. He and Gabby both. They're both 8 years younger, so they It's so strange when you have kids that are so far apart because it's like they get raised by completely different parents. Like, I was a completely different human raising, 5-year-old Layla than I was raising 5-year-old Eli.
Yeah, of course, Layla, number one, would have been learning on the job, and then the other kids come along, and you have experience, and maybe you look back at the way raising Layla, maybe do things a little differently.
A lot differently.
Easy for me to talk. I don't have any kids. I'm talking theoretically.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm talking theoretically, of course. Everybody knows I don't have any kids, so I'm talking somewhat theoretically, but,
Yeah.
Maybe it sounds plausible that's what's going on
Yeah.
there.
It's, that song, Growing Up Raising You. I was 20 when I had her. She grew up with me.
Yeah.
I made all of my mistakes with her. I learned how to be a better mother because of her. But I carry a lot of guilt because I worry that those mistakes are what brought us to this point, and everyone else gets to benefit from them. And she's just gone.
And what about, of course, you stated very early in this conversation that your mother and Layla were very close. What has your mother said about all this?
Oh, my mom. My mom was in denial for a lot longer than I was. Like, she couldn't face it for almost 6 months. And then when it finally did sink in, it was bad. She is struggling, and she's, an older generation. She comes from a generation where you don't talk about your feelings, and you don't talk about your pain and your trauma, and she lost a husband to suicide, and then she lost her best friend, and, in the last couple of years, she's lost a lot of people suddenly, and Layla was the final one, and she is suffering, and she doesn't know how to express it. Again, because that generation just doesn't. They don't know what to do with those feelings. They shove them down, and you're not allowed to have them. And I worry about her, and I worry about what it's going to do to her in the future.
Jennifer, do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for Layla's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell it to the listeners right now?
We do have a group. There's multiple Find Layla groups, shockingly enough. So it's it's join the official search for Layla Santanello. And I'm a mod, and Sierra Boggs is a mod, and Opie Ward is a mod, and that way you know that you're in the right group. So that is a group where I give updates, and when we do searches, that's where I post for volunteers and all that fun stuff. My TikTok, A Beautiful Disaster 101, it's my personal TikTok, and I just started making videos looking for her, and that particular stuff kind of blew up, so I haven't changed anything. People go there to look for Layla updates, and I didn't want to make any changes. I want everything to stay the same for now. And obviously my personal Jennifer Santanello Facebook page is also a place where I share updates and different things.
Okay.
I try to keep the public updated as often as possible, and I try to be, I don't know, for a long time I was kind of I was utilizing social media to share Layla and look for her first and foremost, but it also was helping me cope in a lot of ways. I've been a little bit quiet lately because the struggle is just getting harder and heavier, and I don't know.
It's okay to take some time off once in a while, Jennifer.
I know.
You know.
I know. I feel like I'm failing her.
Yeah. Yeah, this of course we all hope she's found alive tomorrow, and we are doing they're doing this interview on May 12th of 2025. We all hope that she's found alive tomorrow. But of course, it's one of those things like at life, like live like every day like this is the last day, but most people are not going to die tomorrow, so you have to plan for the future as well. You have to find a happy medium. I think that's kind of the way it has to be with this as well. That you have to hope that tomorrow she's going to be found alive, but then you also have to figure out a way that, well, what she's missing for the next 5 years, how am I going to do that? How much time and energy am I going to put into this? Because of course you have other kids who need you, and it's hard to, as other guests who are parents have said on the podcast, it's sometimes difficult to find the right balance between all of them.
It is very hard to find balance. You're absolutely right. That's definitely a struggle. I am very blessed in that I personally have a very amazing support system. My boyfriend is amazing. My mother is amazing. BJ, the boy's dad, and the man who raised Layla, like him and his family, they are amazing. Like, literally, I feel fully embraced and loved and supported by all of the people around me. And even the strangers on the internet have been absolutely amazing and supportive and incredible. And I'm super grateful for that. And I try to like cling to those blessings and find the joy and comfort and love in that. But even still, it gets so hard sometimes because everything feels kind of worthless without her. It kind of feels like I don't know, like I've forgotten how to feel good about anything.
Yeah.
I'm grieving backwards, and it just seems to be getting worse.
Yeah. Jennifer, any final words before we complete this interview?
Thank you for listening to me babble about my beautiful daughter and our crazy life.
There was no babbling. I want to make that clear. There was no babbling. We maybe more than any other podcast out there, we want to make sure that we understand the missing people. We want to what crafted them, whether the missing, it's a child of 5 years old or, a 20-year-old. Of course, we've covered disappearances of 70 and 80-year-olds. It's always important to understand that person, and all the choices and decisions and environment and maybe even genetics that leads up to a disappearance. I think anybody who doesn't take that into account when looking at disappearances is making a huge mistake. So there was no babbling. You're only talking about Layla. It's all very important. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
And that was my May 12th, 2025 interview with Jennifer, mother of Layla Santanello. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. And I want to thank Jason Blair once again for introducing me to Jennifer. I've done a map analysis video for Layla's disappearance. You can find it on Unfound YouTube channel. I also comment on Holland Snap's case. So, what to think about Layla's disappearance? If you've been around Unfound long enough, you know this sounds like the cases of Crystal Morrison, Jay Lushball, Robbie Hurt, and some others. Addicts or recovering addicts who just walked off, but who were eventually found, almost all by accident. Should we think the same way for Layla? Is she deceased, and is it really just a matter of time before someone happens upon her remains near the Americourt? My insight says the odds favor this. But what should be considered that would make us look for other possible outcomes? Well, first, we have to ask ourselves why Layla wasn't seen. The sun was up by that time, seemingly a beautiful morning. There should have been at least a few people on the greenbelt, yet no sighting of Layla. Why? Second, we have to be open to the idea that Layla got picked up by someone. Remember, she was not alone at the Americourt. People who knew her were also there. Did one of them get curious as to where Layla went and tracked her down? Yes, this could have happened. Third, we also have to analyze whether we believe the warehouse worker's story. He says Layla walked off. Did that happen? Because we have to admit that the encounter does sound very random. In fact, despite all the work that has been done, was this even the right day? We know how often witnesses get times and dates wrong. As for Michael, what needs to be said about him was already stated in the interview. He's a bad guy, but his involvement in Layla's disappearance seems very unlikely. Although overall, at least as a theory, foul play could have been committed by someone. Then what about Holland Snap's disappearance? Is it connected? I will say this, yes, hers and Layla's cases look similar. But over almost 9 years, we've learned that disappearances of people like Layla and Holland all look similar, no matter gender, location, or anything else. Now, if someone could connect people who were at the Americourt when Layla was there to the same people who were around Holland when she went missing, then that would catch my attention. Otherwise, I believe these are separate mysteries. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of Layla Santanello, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, sign up, and partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dunsel, and you've been listening to Unfound.